Hello all, I am Dr. Sundaraman Chintamani. I come with 35 plus years of experience, out of which 15 years in hardcore petroleum refining and 20 years in IT plus ITES for oil and gas. Today I am extremely delighted to present this subject on petroleum refining. So this course would be divided into several modules. On this very first module, I am going to give a high level overview about the Indian petroleum industry or an introduction about the Indian petroleum industry. What are we going to cover here? I am going to talk about the milestones that has happened in the Indian oil and gas industry, the energy landscape in general, the energy consumption pattern in India in terms of oil and gas, the oil and gas reserves, the oil and gas production, and about the various initiatives happening through Government of India on the specific industry sector. So as some of you know that the oil and gas value chain is divided into three major segments, that is upstream, midstream and downstream. Upstream segment is predominantly the exploration, drilling and production of the raw materials such as crude oil and natural gas. Then the midstream specifically covers the storage and transportation of the raw materials such as crude oil and natural gas to the downstream manufacturing units. And the downstream industry covers the petroleum refining, petrochemicals manufacturing and marketing of the petroleum products, whether it is bulk or retail. This is how the entire oil and gas value chain is divided into three major blocks. So today let me start with the key milestones that has happened in the Indian oil and gas industry. Year 1886, traces of oil found at Elephant's Feet and the drilling of India's first well by Goodenough, barely 7 years after Edwin L. Drake drilled the world's first oil well in 1859 at Titusville, Pennsylvania in USA. So India was quick enough to catch up with the rest of the world. So within 7 years of the first oil well that was drilled in USA, the oil drilling activity has started in India. In 1889, so the discovery of Digboy oil field at Assam and the starting of the India's first oil well. And also on the same year, the formation of the Assam Oil Company has started. In 1901, the commissioning of India's first refinery at Digboy, Assam. The speciality about this refinery is still running, surpassing 100 years. For last more than 100 years, this is the only refinery that is running across the globe. And in 1911, we had the arrival of Burma Oil Company in India. So Burma Oil Company, which is known as BOC. In 1921, the Assam Oil Company was taken over by Burma Oil Company. In 1956, the major milestone happened in the upstream segment, that is the formation of Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, that is ONGC. In 1959, we had two major public sectors, one in upstream, that is Oil India Limited, in short known as OIL, and in the downstream segment, Indian Oil Corporation, known as IOCL. In 1961, partnership between Government of India and Burma Oil Company in Oil India Limited happened. And in 1962, the very first public sector refinery was constructed and commissioned at Nunmati, Assam. In 1970, spudding of India's first offshore well at Gulf of Cambay happened. And in 74, the major breakthrough happened through the discovery of Bombay High. In 1974, the incorporation of Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, known as HPCL. Within 2 years, in 76, incorporation of Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, that is BPCL, happened. And in 2000, so the world's largest refinery complex was commissioned by Reliance at Jamnagar Refinery Complex. These were all some of the key milestones in the Indian oil and gas industry. So let us now move on to the energy landscape. The role of energy sector in economic development of any country is very vital, because the energy sector produces so many materials that are part and parcel of our day to day life. So, whether it is personal life or the industrial life. So, that is why the energy sector is going to play a major role in the economic development of any country. In India's case, India's dominance in world energy landscape. India is the third largest energy consumer in the world after China and USA. India's primary energy demand is expected to grow a CAGR of 4.2% during 2017 to 2040, much faster than any other economy in the world. And in terms of energy consumption, India is the third largest consumer of energy after China and USA. China consumes 3,366 million tons of oil equivalent, while USA comes in the second rank, consuming 2,236 million tons of oil equivalent, while India comes third rank, consuming 807 million ton oil equivalent. In terms of the energy mix, coal is the primary source of fuel for our country, contributing around 55.1%. Then comes the petroleum resources, that is, oil and natural gas. Combined together, oil and natural gas contribute to 36% of our energy demand. So, now we will understand the importance of oil and gas to our nation. In terms of global oil consumption, again India comes in the third position. The first being USA consuming 842 million tons, China consuming 650 million tons, India comes in the third rank with the consumption of 242 million tons. In terms of natural gas consumption, we are in the very nascent stage. So, India just consumes 60 billion cubic meters, which is almost the 13th position in terms of the consumption. We have a long way to go in terms of the natural gas consumption. Now we have seen the energy demand and then the energy consumption. Now let us see the crude oil reserves in our country. The estimated reserves of crude oil in India is 619 million tons. Amongst that, the largest reserves are found in the western offshore, that is Mumbai High, Krishna Godavari Basin, around 40%, and Assam contributes to 27%. So, this is how our oil reserves are split across the country. In terms of the natural gas reserves, the estimated reserves of natural gas in India is 1,340 billion cubic meters. The largest reserves of natural gas are located in the eastern offshore, around 38%, and the western offshore, 23%. Of course, the rest of the country is contributing to the remaining portion. India is in the 25th place in producing crude oil, while US, Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Iraq are the top 5 oil producing countries. When we move on to the gas side, we are in the 29th position, while US, Russian Federation, Iran, Qatar, and China are the top 5 gas producing countries. The crude oil production in terms of absolute numbers would be 32.2 million metric tons in 2019-20. The natural gas production is 31.2 million metric standard cubic meters in 2019 and 20. If you have seen these facts and figures, India's oil and gas demand has outpaced the supply significantly. The gap is expected to widen in future as India becomes the leading energy consumer in the world. So what does it mean? What does it mean? There is a huge gap between the supply and demand, whether it is oil or gas. So the government of India has to come out with a lot of reforms in the energy sector. Now in this episode, let's try to understand the different initiatives brought out by the government of India. So the reforms have been brought in exploration and licensing policy. The prime objectives of the policy are to intensify the exploration activities, attract foreign and domestic investment, enhance domestic production. So now let us see the individual policies or programs or initiatives that has been brought in by the government of India to increase the production or to reduce the supply and demand. The first and foremost is the hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy, which is in short known as HELP. The new hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy was launched in 2017. This has replaced the previous policy known as New Exploration Licensing Policy, which was called as NELP. The current HELP policy provides a uniform licensing system to explore and produce all forms of hydrocarbons such as oil, gas, coal bed methane, shale oil, shale gas, etc., under a single licensing framework. So, this has reduced a lot of bureaucratic delays so that the production can be enhanced at the earliest. Then comes the next initiative known as National Data Repository, which is in short known as NDR. NDR is an exploration and production data bank with the state of art facilities and infrastructure for preservation, upkeep, and dissemination of the data. The type of ENP data that is being stored in NDR are seismic data, well and log data, spatial data, other G&G data like drilling, reservoir, production, geological, gravity, magnetic survey, etc. And finally, various miscellaneous reports and documents. So, all these documents will be archived, maintained, and managed at the NDR. Then we move on to policy known as OALP. OALP stands for Open Acreage Licensing Policy. The open acreage licensing policy is part of the hydrocarbon exploration and licensing policy. It helps the potential investors, companies who can view the surface and subsurface geological, geophysical, and other technical data on the NDR and submit their expression of interest whenever there is a bidding opportunity throughout the year. Then comes the DSF policy. DSF stands for Discovered Small Field. The aim of the DSF policy is to monetize hydrocarbon resources locked in for years. A total of 30 contracts for 43 discovered small fields were signed with 20 companies in March 2017 under the first round of bidding. Under the second round, another 59 discovered small fields, unmonetized discoveries, clubbed into 25 new contracts that were offered for bidding in 2018. These fields are estimated to have 195 million metric tons oil and oil equivalent gas. Then the government of India has come out with the CGD, City Gas Distribution, Natural Gas Grid and City Gas Distribution. Development of additional 13,500 kilometers long gas pipeline is underway to complete the natural gas grid across the country. The government has put strong emphasis on expansion of city gas distribution, that is CGD network across the country. CGD network ensures the supply of cleaner fuel, that is PNG, piped natural gas, to households, industrial and commercial units, as well as transportation fuel, that is CNG, to vehicles. So, primarily this CNG or PNG is going to replace LPG for the domestic customers. So, right now we are in the LPG era where the LPG is marketed to the individual customers through cylinders. Huge money is spent on the logistic aspect of the cylinders which are carrying the LPG. the cylinders have to be filled in the refinery, then they have to be moved to the godowns, and from there they are distributed to the retailers. From there they are finally distributed with the manual process to the end customer. So much of money and effort is spent on the logistic aspect of the LPG cylinder movement. When the LNG is replacing the LPG, huge money would be saved in terms of the logistics aspects. Then comes the implementation of the fuel standards, which is known as Bharat Standard 4, Bharat Standard 6, BS4 and BS6 standards. BS4 fuels have already been introduced in parts of the country to reduce the carbon emission. The government further decided that the country would leapfrog directly from BS4 to BS6 fuel standards. So we are not thinking about the intermediate standard such as BS5. That is the urgency of the situation. The major difference between the existing BS4 and the forthcoming BS6 norms is the presence of sulfur in the fuel. That is, while BS4 fuels contain 50 ppm sulfur, the BS6 grade fuel only has 10 ppm sulfur content. So that is how it is going to make a positive impact on the environment. Then comes yet another initiative known as Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, originally aimed to provide LPG connections to 5 crores women belonging to below poverty line families over a period of 3 years. Now the same program, the target has been revised from 5 crores to 8 crores. So that is how the below poverty line people are going to be benefited by getting the clean fuel. So this is not only going to help them to improve their productivity in their day to day work, it is also going to help reduce pollution because the BPL families all along were using firewood for their day to day cooking needs. And it is also going to improve their health conditions because many people are suffering from lung diseases due to the burning of the wooden fuels. Then comes the PAHAL scheme or DPTL scheme. DPTL stands for Direct Benefit to the LPG Customer. DPTL scheme aims to rationalize subsidies based on the approach to cut subsidy leakages. So today the huge money is spent on subsidy, but it is very difficult to track them, and there are scenarios where the subsidy is being leakaged. So right now, under the PAHAL scheme, the LPG consumers who join the scheme will get the LPG cylinders at a non-subsidized price and receive the LPG subsidy directly into their bank accounts as per their entitlements. So this way, the subsidy leakages are avoided to a great extent. Moving on to the downstream side, the Government of India has brought initiatives in the digital payment mechanisms. There has been a significant expansion of digital payment infrastructure at fuel retail outlets. At the point of sale terminals, e wallet facilities have been provided, and the retail outlets have been enabled with Beam UPI. Even all the LPG distributors and city gas distribution companies are also enabled with the Beam UPI. Then comes the national policy on biofuels. Today, biofuels are being an integral part of the refining industry across the globe. India is no exception. The national policy on biofuels 2018 has been notified by the Government of India with a target of 20% blending of ethanol in petrol by 2030. The policy is expected to boost the biofuel program of the country and also widen the scope of raw material for ethanol procurement. So, this is not only going to reduce the environmental pollution, this is also going to help the farming community to a great extent because ethanol would be procured from the farmers and then finally will be blended along with the gasoline. Then comes the initiative of compressed biogas plants, which is known as SATAT. SUSTAT stands for Sustainable Alternative Towards Affordable Transportation. So, this initiative was launched to promote compressed biogas, which is known as CBG, as an alternative green transport fuel for efficient management biomass and organic waste. The target is to have 5,000 compressed biogas plants of 15 million metric tons per year with an investment potential of around 20 billion US dollars. Then comes the very important initiative known as Strategic Petroleum Reserves. So today almost 80% of the crude oil is being imported in our country. So I'll explain in detail about the breakup in our next module. So when 80% of the crude oil is being imported for our refining industry, there is a huge dependency on foreign countries. If at all, if the crude import is stalled due to any of the political or non-political situations, then the refining industry is going to be having a major impact. So in order to avoid such kind of scenario, we need to have strategic reserves. So of course, the refineries, they have mandatory crude tank farms wherein the crude oil is stored so that the crude oil supply is taken care in a seamless fashion. Apart from that, the government of India or the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas come out with a new initiative known as Strategic Petroleum Reserves. So under this scheme, strategic reserves are identified in different parts of the country. So wherein the crude oil is stored in underground salt cavern. So some of the strategic reserves identified where already the strategic reserves are built are Vishakhapatnam and Mangalore and Padur. So under phase 1, 5.33 million metric tons of crude oil has been stored to take care of the refining needs. So again this program is extended into phase 2. In phase 2, another 6.5 million metric tons of crude oil can be stored. So that is how this government is proactively thinking about the energy security of the country and taking care of the infrastructural needs. So this has been done by a special vehicle known as Strategic Petroleum Reserves of India. So in summary, in today's episodes, we have tried to understand the major milestones that have happened in the Indian oil and gas industry. So this started with how we started our the petroleum industry within 7 years of the first oil discovery that has happened in US, and then we moved on how the different public sectors have emerged: ONGC, Indian Oil Corporation, BPCL, and Bharat Petroleum Corporation. Then we quickly glanced through the energy landscape. We talked about the India's energy demand and specifically the demand for crude oil and natural gas. Then we discussed about the production numbers and finally concluded that there is a huge gap between the supply and the demand. In order to address these gaps, in order to address the pain areas, the government of India has come out with several initiatives, and each of these initiatives we have gone through at a very high level. So definitely all these initiatives that will help us to improve our crude oil production, natural gas production, try to reduce the losses, and finally we are going to become a self-reliant country. So in the coming episodes, I'll talk about the refining industry in depth. We'll talk about the different business processes that are part of the petroleum refining industry, and finally we will also talk about the refinery of the future. So this is how we start the course on petroleum refinery. So this course would be helpful for graduates who are pursuing petrochemical engineering or the graduates who are pursuing the chemical engineering discipline. So see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.